Welcome to the OTA podcast where we discuss everything performance training. I'm Coach Chris Barnard. Let's get into it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the OTA podcast. All things sports performance related. I'm your host, Coach Chris Barnard, and for today's video, all these topics I kind of base off of the conversations that I'm having in our coaching program. I thought it was a really great conversation that we had the other day with some of our coaches, and it's all pertaining to basically optimal speed development and the truth behind really optimally developing linear speed in athletes, right? We tend to have misconceptions from a programming standpoint and from an overall general overview, like what are the best ways to do it? The first thing that I wanted to be able to establish is you can't look at developing speed independently. And what I mean by that is like you can't just look at it in a vacuum and think that you're going to take an athlete out to a field and have them sprint and be able to develop their speed. Now, contradicting that, you will get results. If an athlete isn't sprinting and you have them sprinting, they're going to get faster. But when I say optimally, what I'm meaning is there other things, right? If we're trying to essentially, what is the best results that we can get at the end of like a 3-month or 4-month block? And what I mean by that is you have to be congruent and you have to factor in their force development, their resistance training, their mobility, their rest recovery, and all of those things have to work cohesively to be able to optimally or for the best results that you can get with your athlete. So the biggest mistake that I saw a lot of people making was they're not looking at it from a holistic point of view. Right? They're not looking about, how they're absolute developing an athlete's absolute strength, right, is then going to then produce and overall build up the athlete's power force and how that actually transfers over into the action of sprinting. And so that was the biggest key thing that I'm trying to drive home. And when you actually start to kind of break that down, what I mean by when it has to be cohesive and congruent is you have to realize and specifically know what you're trying to develop. So for instance, on the force development side, it's like we're trying to consciously develop an athlete's horizontal and vertical force. Why? Horizontally, that's going to directly translate over to the athlete's ability to accelerate in drive phase. Think of this as the first 10, 15 yards where the athlete is attacking back down to ground and projecting themselves horizontally. When the athlete's torso becomes more upright and they're performing a more cyclical motion when they're in a top speed or max velocity phase, the athlete's foot is striking slightly straight down where it's going to rely more on vertical force. So these are two things that we consciously want to be able to develop, right? We're not just mindlessly throwing jump training around, right, and having them perform some sprints over here. We're actively trying to develop these things so that they can essentially overall increase an athlete's linear speed. Another example would be an athlete's absolute strength, right? And the reason why I say it ties all in is because when we evaluate an athlete, we're trying to take between their speed, their force, and their absolute strength, and we're trying to find the weakest link between those and how do we attack them. It's not to say that we don't focus on all three in the phases of our program or over the course of our off season. We're going to sprint, we're going to jump, and we're going to lift. But what we want to be able to do is we want to kind of identify the specific needs for the athlete. For instance, if I see an athlete who's decently fast, has a good vertical jump, a decent RSI, right, but lacks, a trap bar deadlift, 3-rep max, right? I'm going to know that I want to focus, right? I want to place my emphasis this off season on building that athlete up to a certain standard in their absolute strength. I know that if I bring that weakness up, it's going to overall enhance the athlete's force, which in then turn is going to overall enhance the athlete's ability to sprint. This is why I say you can't look at them. You can't just sprint over here and have a sprinting program, go do your lifting program over here, add a couple jumps in there, add some core training and call it a day. All of these things need to work in unison to get those optimal results. What's up, coaches? Real quickly, let me go ahead and introduce you to Performance Coach U certification. Now, this is the certification / course that I put together for coaches who want to train athletes and not only get results, but also maximize profits in the private sector. The problem that I saw with a lot of these courses and certifications out there for coaches was that they provided a lot of information and not a lot of application. So I wanted to pull back the covers over 10+ years of experience and show you the ins and outs of actually being in the trenches so that you get maximum results while also scaling your business. So if you're interested in this, go ahead and check out the link down below and you can get more information. Other factors that you can kind of consider: if the athlete has, some form of, they don't have the mobility or the flexibility to be able to get into positions that they need to get in, or something's restricting them, things such as like if their hip flexors are too tight. These are all things, usually I find that most athletes can perform the optimal motions, but there is other things. Do they lack the core strength? And then we can get into things such as their sprint mechanics, their patterns, whether they're front side or backside. If they're backside dominant, usually it's a strength issue, or it could be a mechanical issue and they need to train those motor patterns to become more front side. And now you consider all these other extracurricular, I shouldn't say extracurricular, just extra things that are cherries on top of their sprint training, where the bulk of it is going to come down to those things where, yes, we have the athlete sprinting, because obviously to get better at that action, you need to perform that action and you have to do it for a volume at a high intensity. Number two, the force development. Like I said, we both focus on vertical jump and their RSI, their reactive strength. And then number three, absolute strength. And obviously in turn with that becomes their relative strength. So as long as you're having those all working congruently, you will then get optimal results with your athletes as far as their speed goes. So just wanted to make sure that I kind of reiterate that in this, as far as I see a lot of coaches out there talking about a lot of different ways to develop speed. And the biggest thing, I think the biggest missing piece is you have to look at it as all one holistic thing that works together to be able to develop that one action and other actions. And you can't just look at it as compartmentalizing these things and trying to develop them separately or independently and think that it's going to come together. So I hope that helps. If you guys are interested in more speed development, go ahead and check out the link down below. I'll talk to you guys next time.